Hey there, Tesla people. This is Jason here with Level Head Trading, giving you an update on Tesla today. It's Thursday, March 14th, so most of the week has expired. We got one more day left, and so let's just jump right in there. So I'm just going to go on the three time frames that I am just going to stick to, which is the daily, the weekly, and the 2 week chart. That's pretty. That's kind of my main one. There is the 2 week chart. I expanded on that in the last couple of videos. So going on the daily chart first, what I want to point out again and kind of emphasize this is there's an area back here, and I drew these lines to show you the top end and the bottom end of this block, which I'll get into later. But again, so this area here was a gap. So you can see it on the daily chart. You can't see it on the weekly chart because when there's a whole week, it just takes 5 days, and you wouldn't see this gap in there. But I like looking at gaps because usually they are filled. So back during this time here in April of 23, you notice how it pulled back and it just got right to about this area here, a little bit lower, but it didn't quite get down into that area where there's a gap. So the highest price area of this gap is 146.50. Yeah, 146.50. That's the very top of where you gapped out of. So I still think we're going to get down into that area. So that's number one, filling up this gap area because you didn't really fill it right here. That was the closest you got, and then we just get all the way back to where we are today. So you have increasing volume here on the daily chart. It's one of the higher ones. You had another one here, which was a large body candle, increasing volume and increasing volume, large body candle. Here's another large body candle, large volume. So the volume, you need volume to push something in one direction or the other. So that's what's happening on the daily chart. Other thing I want to point out, which I'll go into real quick here, is as I mentioned, I was wondering how Tesla was going to react when the broader market, notably QQQ, but really the entire market, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, they had been going up while Tesla was already just falling and falling and falling. So I was curious as to, is it going to fall even harder when the market starts turning around and taking some steps backwards? Or would Tesla kind of act in reverse? Well, the case is it just acts even more to the downside. And so just briefly going into this example, here's the high ever of QQQ, and that was on March 8th. Okay, so that was on the high. That was the high. It opened right near the all-time highs, peaked a little bit above, making the all-time high, but closing down at the lows. So that was on Friday, March 8th. And so what was Tesla's reaction on March 8th? There is, I'm sorry. Was that March 8th? Okay. Here's March 8th. That's this candle. So a pretty strong candle. So that was on the same day that the stock market had pulled back. And then more notably, the last 2 days have been negative, pretty strong negative days for Tesla. So 2 straight days down. And then this is what QQQ did the last 2 days. So 3 days ago, it finished up here. And then it had a day of pullback, not a big pullback, but that was 2 days ago. And then that's today finishing even slightly lower. So 2 negative days in a row. And then the last 2 days on Tesla, negative, negative. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Tesla is so extreme. I'm anticipating that it'll probably level off. And in my opinion, it'll flatten out, probably create another daily bear flag. There'll probably be some bounce, in there, and and it'll trade sideways at some point for a while because it's pretty extreme. We're back down under 30 in the daily RSI at 2769, but notice the average is still up there at 40. So when I'm really interested in something, I like to see the average getting smacked down. So back in this area here where Tesla made the brief higher daily, the daily trend change here was the average was down at 26. So notice the average got bumped up because of this upward action. So it pushed the average right back up again into the 40s. And so now it's pulling back. So in my opinion, this average RSI also needs to get down, to 30 or somewhere thereabouts, and before we potentially find a bottom. So that's the daily chart. So again, just going back, I drew these lines because this is the block of activity that I'm going to talk about on the weekly chart. So here's the gap area, and here's today's price. It's right at this line here. So that last area of support before we potentially drop lower is this area here, which was the monthly higher low down at 150, 52.37. So we're quickly approaching that, and that's not a very strong area of support. There wasn't a lot of activity here building a base. So now going into the weekly chart, this was where the base was developed right here. So this is that block underneath the gap fill area, down around 146 and so. So I drew a line across the tops of the candles where there was the most touches. So there's the most touches on the weekly in this block right here. So right here, here, you see you have several weeks where that was the key level really to get over about 150. So you traded within this, I'm not going to count the high here and the high here because this is when you broke out. So you were in this wedge, which formed a triangle. Notice the higher lows on the weekly, and then you formed that wedge, and then you broke out to the upside. So I think we're going to get into this area. Again, this is 3 months of activity. And so what I'm kind of hoping, what I really want to happen is for Tesla to get into this area and not just then take off immediately. I don't think that will happen. I think, this is just my humble opinion. When there's big money that wants to get in at a really good price, it's called accumulation. So this was an accumulation phase where there was money coming in here, but you don't want to push the price immediately out of there because let's just say you have, you're a big fund and you want to buy, I don't know what numbers, but let's just say you want to buy $100 million of Tesla. Well, that pushes the price up, but you don't want it to just take off because you really want to buy, $500 million of Tesla. And that's probably the case with many different investment people, investment funds. They're just getting in here, but you don't want it to just take off because then you won't be able to get a full position in there, if you understand what I'm saying. So in order to get a full position, this took 3 months, 13 weeks, 12, 13 weeks. So that's what I'm hoping will happen because then that'll give us time to say, okay, this is what's happening, right? Let's just say this plays over again and we have many weeks where we're trading within a zone. Then I'll feel more confident buying because I'll say, okay, this looks like this is an area that people are interested in, and they're buying. It's not getting, it's not pushing up, immediately taking off without you being able to get a position in there. So I'm hoping that something similar to this will happen again, and then that way I can build a position and then clearly see, okay, here's the low, here's the high, here's a higher low, a double top, and then a higher low to that, a higher low to that, and then tight, and then you break out. So so that's another point. Here is the weekly candle. So another wide body, long body. There's been no buying. You're finishing. We got one more day left, but unless there's an amazing change of events, this candle is going to finish on the low side. And there's that big wick on the top. And then it just continued further downside. So I don't think this is a very strong area of support because it only lasted this one particular week. This was just 1 week. 1 week of action, and then you took off. So now going into the the other point is now on the weekly RSI. Like I said, I believe we need to get oversold on the weekly because over here you got to 70, and if you go farther back, you got up into 83 on the weekly chart. Way back here, October 25 of the week of October 25, 2021. But you got oversold, okay? So I like to see that. You got oversold at 28.7 on the weekly chart. Then you got to the area where you should start selling at 70, exactly, 70.19. And that marked the top right up here. And then we have our pullback. And so currently we're at 33.9. So to me, I think we're going to get down to that 30 area, potentially more, before we bottom out, and then hopefully have many, many weeks where we just build a base of support where more people are getting in and saying, yeah, this is attractive. Right now, there's just mega negative news on Tesla. And so now on the 2-week chart, so need to get oversold on the weekly, need to get into that gap fill area down starting at like 146, breaking below this 152 area. Again, only 1 week of activity here, where when we go back here, we've got 3 months building that higher low on the weekly. So you going up, higher low, higher high, higher low, and then take off on the races. So now on the 2-week chart, what I'm going to bring up is the moving average. Okay, so I was talking about RSI levels on the weekly, needing to get oversold down, to 30 or maybe a little less than that. If that does play out, and we do get into that gap fill area down below 150 and get into the 140s, potentially the 130s, then the 2-week chart, which this week is the beginning of the 2-week chart. So we're only almost a week into this candle. So we still have all of next week for this 2-week candle to finish. And it's already, as you can see, it's already a very long body candle to the downside. So what I'm looking at, not so much is RSI on the 2-week chart. I'm looking at the 2-week 200 moving average. And I won't make that mistake again. The 2-week 200 moving average, which is right here. So currently it's at 122. So that falls into that range of that block over here. The low side is 110, and the upside, like I said, I'm not going to count the very high end of this. I'm just going to take the most often tops, which this one was 154.57. The top of that was 153.98, and the top of this one was 155.30. So all right around 155. And again, the low side, 109.96, so 110. So I think that's going to be the sweet spot, that area somewhere in that range. And hopefully, like I was saying, that then we will have weeks of activity once we get down into there where things slow down and you create a candle. Now, this is going on the upside, so this wouldn't be a really good example, but I would like to see. Oh, you know what? And again, this is a 2 week chart. So let me just throw it back to the 1 week chart. So when you finally come down and stop and slow momentum to the downside, then you're no longer going to have those long body weekly candles. This is what I'm hoping to see, is putting the brakes on and then having a very small body and another small body candle and another small body candle, another small body. See, this was building, this was accumulation again, but it played out in a quicker amount of time. So this was accumulation, and it took a month to play out. And I'm going to correct something, because I said that this only took 1 week to play out, but this was a 2 week candle. So I stand corrected. This is 2 weeks of activity. But if you go to the weekly chart, looking at that time frame, that was probably this right here, or this week and this week. So this and this was probably the finish of that 2 week candle. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So I was just checking how this played out. So this week of December 19th, starting December 27th, that was a 2 week candle. And then this week, starting January 3rd and January 9th, was that bottoming out candle right here. So that was January 3rd starting and January 9th. Those 2 weeks were this candle. And then the prior 2 weeks was this candle, and then finishing up with a little bit of a wick. And then again, you had 2 slow down weeks. Well, really, you had 4 weeks, right? But this was one 2 week candle. This was the second 2 week candle, which formed that small bodied candle. And then this week and this week created this breakout candle right here. So the first week, it was only up to about here. And then the second week, that's when it took off. And that was this candle right there. So that's what I'm hoping will play out, is that we'll have something similar to that once we bottom out, and then we'll have several weeks, maybe more than a month. I'm hoping it'll be more than a month, because then it'll give me more time to analyze the activity, such as something like this, where I can say, okay, we got a bottom, we got a top, we got resistance, we pull back, but when we pull back, we form a higher low, and then we push again, and then we pull back, and we form, kind of a higher low relative to that low. And then on this week, then you finally break out of the pattern, except for that one right there, and then you continue on. So that's what I'm looking for. And how long that'll take, it could be, because we're not down to this area yet. And like I said, we might have days and days where we just kind of trade around this price, since we're already kind of oversold on the shorter time frame, the daily. So it could be months, before we, settle down and build this base. And I think that would be reasonable to assume that, because the broader market is still at its highs. And so if this pulls back, it's not going to hit its bottom, immediately. It'll take time. First, you break the daily uptrend. So on QQQ, we're not in the daily uptrend still, but we're not in a daily downtrend yet. But we're very close to it. We need to break this candle right here, and then we will have confirmed a daily downtrend. So if that gets confirmed, then I believe it'll be in sync with Tesla working its way down. So they're not going to go hand in hand exactly down together. I'm sure, like I said, that at some point Tesla will probably have a bounce, even though the market might be going down because Tesla's gotten already pretty beaten up. So that's my video for today. It's Thursday, again, March 14th. Any of you that aren't subscribed or, are subscribed, but if you're not, please subscribe. You need to build up that number, get more views, and keep it going.